All right, guys, we're going to go over our grammar review for this week. So we're going to start with Monday. All right, on this one, it says, name the part of speech of the underlined words. So our sentence says, the West was best known for cowboys and cattle drives. So our first underlined word is West. Now, if you will notice, that is capitalized, which means it's going to be talking about a specific place. So we know that that would be a noun. Next one would be cowboys. Now we know that cowboys would be people, and people are also going to be nouns. The last one is cattle. Now normally if you see the word cattle, it would be referring to the animal. However, because it is talking about cattle drives, cattle is actually describing the word drives this time. So that would be an adjective in this case. The second box says, which best completes the sentence? You have the Transcontinental Railroad was the blank way to move across the U.S. Your choices are most fastest, faster, and fastest. So we're trying to see the railroad was the blank way to move across the U.S. So we are talking about comparing this railroad to all the other types of transportation. So we know that we're going to mark out faster because we can't use that. It would just be comparing two things. So now let's read it with both of our other choices. The Transcontinental Railroad was the most fastest way to move across the U.S., or the Transcontinental Railroad was the fastest way to move across the U.S. Now, I'm sure if you read that to yourself, fastest is going to be what sounds correct. All right, your next box just gives you a list of words that are going to be used on the rest of this row for the week. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next box underneath. It says, which part of speech is underlined? The balloon flew above our heads. Now, if we are looking at the phrase above our heads, we know that that is a prepositional phrase. We know that a prepositional phrase begins with a preposition. So in this case, above would be a preposition. It is telling you where the balloon is flying. All right, the next one says, which of the words is an antonym for tired? You have alert, weary, exhausted, and drowsy. Now we know if you are alert, you're not going to be very sleepy. So that sounds good for right now, but let's look at the other choices. If someone is weary, that's going to be very similar to being tired. You don't have a lot of energy. So we can cancel that one out. All right, with exhausted, we all know that the word exhausted means that you are very tired. So again, that is not going to be an antonym. Your last one is drowsy. Again, we know that drowsy is very similar to being sleepy or tired, so it cannot be an antonym of tired. So that leaves us with the word alert. All right, the next one on Monday says simile or metaphor, and what does it mean? Your sentence says, I felt like a fish out of water. Now, we know if we're looking for a simile or a metaphor, we're talking about comparing two things. So let's figure out which two things are being compared first. I felt like a fish out of water. In this case, we are comparing I to a fish. All right, now we need to figure out if it is a simile or a metaphor. Now we know right here there is a keyword like. That keyword tells us that this one is going to be a simile. All right, next it says expand the sentence by using more descriptive language. The bird flew over the house. Now, if you want to add descriptive language, it means you're going to give me more details. You're going to make the sentence more interesting. So you could say something like, the giant bird flew over the small house. And that just gives you a little bit more information to that sentence, makes it a little more interesting. That way your reader can actually picture what the sentence is talking about. All right, the last one on Monday says write the meaning of the root scrib or script. Now, if you see either of these roots in a word, this is going to help you understand that the word you are looking at is going to mean to write something or something that is written out. I'm going to take just a second and pause, and then I will move on to Tuesday. All right, the first box on Tuesday says to complete the chart. You have one column talking about the verbs, one column talking about the verb tenses. So we know that the verb we are looking at is dance. That is currently in the present tense. So to make the word dance past tense, we are going to change that to danced. It already happened, it is past tense. Now to make it in the future, it means it hasn't happened yet, it is going to. So we need to say will dance. All right, your next box talks about simple, compound, or complex sentences. Your sentence says, while cattle trails seemed safe, they were actually very dangerous. Now here we have an independent clause at the end. That means this part of the sentence could be a sentence on its own. However, the first half of the sentence says, while cattle trails seemed safe. That's going to be a dependent clause. It needs something extra to make it into a complete thought. So this is not going to be a simple sentence. So we're left with compound or complex. Now, if you are using a compound sentence, you will have two independent clauses. That means that both parts of your sentence can stand on their own. So in this case, we have a complex sentence. All right, the next box says which word best completes the sentence. Your desk is blank to mine. All right, now remember, with this whole row, we are going to choose from a word out of this word list. So we have adhesive, disapprove, adequate, disable, abnormal, dismantle, addicted, absorb, adjacent, and abstract. So in this sentence, your desk is blank to mine. We are going to go with the word adjacent. Now, if a desk is adjacent to another, that means it is next to or close to. So in this case, that word makes the most sense. All right, which word or phrase best completes the sentence? Jimmy exercises every day. Blank, yesterday he ran 3 miles. All right, you have the choices of finally, for example, or in conclusion. Let's start with finally. Jimmy exercises every day. Finally, yesterday, he ran 3 miles. Now, that doesn't really make too much sense. If we're saying he does this every day, finally really doesn't fit in because it's not the end of something happening. He's still going to continue to exercise every day. All right, let's look at the next one. It says, for example, Jimmy exercises every day. For example, yesterday he ran 3 miles. So with for example, you are giving an example showing that he is exercising. So right now, that sounds the best. All right, then we have in conclusion. Jimmy exercises every day. In conclusion, he ran 3 miles. Now again, we're not concluding anything. So this one doesn't really make sense either. So the best option here is going to be for example. All right, which word could replace the underlined word? The article about the girl who survived the shark attack was fascinating. All right, so we're looking for a word that's got the same meaning as fascinating. Our choices are interesting, unexciting, and boring. Now in this case, we can see unexciting and boring are very similar. However, they are the opposite of the meaning of fascinating. So we know that our answer here is going to be interesting. Next box says, what does the idiom mean? Don't beat around the bush. Now, if you tell someone don't beat around the bush, you are telling them to get to the point. You don't want them to keep leading you along. You don't want them to keep going on, avoiding what they're trying to say. You want them to get to the point they're trying to make. All right, the next one says combine the sentences by creating a compound sentence. Now remember, on the box above, we talked about the difference between compound and complex sentences. If it is a compound sentence, you're going to have two independent clauses combined to create one complete sentence. So in this case, we could say something like, the bird flew over the house, comma, and the bird flew down the street. So if we were to say these sentences separately, they could still both be complete sentences. However, we want to combine them into one complete sentence. All right, on the next box, it says make a list of words with scrib or script. So we know that those two root words mean to write. So an example of a word you could have written would be manuscript. This is something that is written out. However, there are several different words you could put here. So just think of a couple that have either the root scrib or script. I'll take a second and pause, and then I'll move on to Wednesday. All right, on Wednesday, it says name the part of speech of the underlined words. We have cowboys used cattle trails to get their cattle to the railroads. All right, so cowboys used. This is going to be an action. It's what the cowboys are doing. So used in this case would be a verb. All right, the next one would be there. For the word there. I know that it may look like there is describing cattle, so it may have confused you and you might have thought adjective. However, in this case, there is a word being used in place of the word cowboys. So this is a pronoun. In this case, the reason it looks like it is showing a description of the cattle is because it is a possessive pronoun. It's showing who the cattle belong to. And then your last one is railroads. This is a thing, so we know that that is going to be a noun. Next box says to correct the dialogue. Your sentence says, cowboys still exist today, said the teacher. All right, we know when we are doing dialogue, we always begin the statement that is being said with quotations. So cowboys still exist today. That's where the end of my statement is. So it needs to have a comma, quotation marks, said the teacher. Make sure you put a period at the end to make it a complete sentence. Next box says, which word best completes the sentence? Please blank the puzzle before you put it away. So we're going back to our list of words from Monday's column. In this case, if we know that we are putting a puzzle away, we're going to have to tear it apart. We're going to have to make it into smaller pieces to fit it back into the box. So in this case, the word dismantle is going to be the correct choice. If you dismantle something, you are tearing it apart. You are making it smaller. All right, what part of speech is underlined? It says he loves to write, yet he cannot think of what to say he cannot think of a way to start his story. Yet is combining this thought with this one. So we know that when we are combining two different thoughts to make a complete sentence, a lot of times we are going to use a conjunction. So in this case, yet is a conjunction. The next box says the two underlined words are synonyms. What does the word reconcile mean? After a huge argument, James and Frank reconciled after their mom told them to resolve their problems. So if we know that these two have a similar meaning, reconcile and resolve, we can go ahead and say that it means to resolve something. If you reconcile, you're resolving your issues. You are making them right. You're figuring out a way to work out your differences. All right, next we have another simile or metaphor. So your sentence says, the snow was a blanket over the house. Now in this case, we are comparing the snow to a blanket. Now I don't see any of those keywords that we know to look for to find a simile. So that must mean that this time we have a metaphor. Okay, the next one, we are combining these two sentences to create a complex sentence. So this means we need a dependent clause as well as an independent clause. So in this case, you could say something like, the bird flew over the house, then down the street. So if you will notice, we're saying the same thing as we did in this box. However, I did not make two independent clauses as the two parts of my sentence. This last piece would not be able to be a complete sentence on its own. It would depend on another thought to make it a complete statement. All right, next one says, write the meaning of the root DICT. Now, if you see this root in a word, you are going to know that it means to say something. All right, I'll take a second and pause, and then we will move on to Thursday. All right, Thursday's box at the top says, make the verbs past tense to complete the sentence. It says, cowboys blank their cattle to the east for more money. Now, our verb that we are given is sell. So in order to change sell to past tense, we know that would become sold. Next one says, correct the possessive noun in the sentence. It says, the cowboy's boot got caught in the barbed wire. Now we know that our possessive noun would be cowboys. We are talking about the cowboy's boot. So in this case, we are just talking about one cowboy, not several of them. So we would need apostrophe S to make it a correct possessive noun. The next one says, which word best completes the sentence? Again, we are using our list from Monday's box. Your sentence says, the towel was able to blank most of the liquid. All right, if we know that a towel is supposed to clean up or pick up liquid when it is spilled, let's see which of these words would make the most sense. The one I see that is closest to that meaning would be the word absorb. Something is absorbed, it is cleaned up, it is picked up. It means the towel is collecting the liquid that was spilled. All right, next one is asking where the comma goes. Meanwhile, she worked on her homework until it was complete. All right, in this case, we know that the comma would go after the word meanwhile. The next box says, which word can mean a short amount of time and something small? You have second, minute, and miniature. Now, a second is going to be an amount of time, but you don't describe something little as being a second. So that would not be correct. All right, we're going to look at miniature next. We also know that that is something small, but that is not referring to an amount of time. So it does not meet both of our things that we need to have the definition of. So the next one would be minute. Now, the word minute is talking about an amount of time. However, if you pronounce it as minute, the same spelling occurs, and then it becomes something small. So in this case, it would be the word minute. You just have to pronounce it differently to make it also mean something small. All right, your next box says, what does the adage or proverb mean? An apple a day keeps the doctor away. Now, if you've heard anyone say this to you, they are basically telling you that if you do something healthy, it's going to keep you well. So if you do something healthy, it's going to help keep you well, and there's a smaller chance of you having to go to the doctor or getting sick, something like that. All right, next box says reduce the sentence by taking out unnecessary words. The sentence says, the bird, fast and furious, flew over the house, and on that same day, he also flew down the street. Now, you could have changed this in a couple different ways, but the most simplified way to change this would be to take out fast and furious. We don't really need to know that about the bird to get our point across. So right now we have the bird flew over the house, and on that same day, he also flew down the street. Now that's still saying a whole lot of extra information. So let's see what else we can take out. If we're trying to say that the bird is flying over the house and he flew down the street, really we can take out all of this information. Now your sentence would say, the bird flew over the house and flew down the street. So that's a much more simplified sentence, and we got the same point across. All right, your last box, you are going to make a list of words with that root D-I-C-T. So one example could be dictate. If you dictate something, you are saying what was written down. So again, you could have had several different words here. This is just an example of what you could have used. And that is the end of this video. Feel free to go back and check over your answers if you missed any.